How I got all A's, a foolproof method. Hi everyone, it's Kyoung here. I hope you guys are doing well. Today's video is going to be about how I studied in university. This was highly requested and I hope this would be helpful for you whether you're starting university in the fall or you're a current university student. To briefly introduce myself, I majored in biology as an undergrad and I have taken a variety of courses in science, arts, and humanities. In my first year, I didn't really know how to study smart. I studied hard and I would write aesthetically pleasing notes, but they weren't the most effective use of my time. It took me a semester to figure out what study methods work for me and that are effective in each of the courses. I'm going to be sharing my tips from time managing to note-taking and preparing for tests so you can apply these tips to yourself and modify them to suit your learning style. First, scheduling and time managing. At the beginning of the semester, if you're like me, you will get a new planner and get all excited about the new semester and use different color pens to make it look pretty. But what's more important than having it all pretty is to actually use it for its intended purpose. During the first week of school, you'll receive a syllabus in each of your classes. A syllabus is like an outline that tells you when tests and exams are, when major projects and papers are due, as well as class expectations, grading schemes, and other miscellaneous information that you need to keep in mind. So you can download all of them, or if they give you the physical handout, then you can compile them together and write them all down in your agenda, bullet journal, or your calendar, whichever one you use. And enter all the due dates, but keep them all in the same place because you might forget things if you have them in different places. Sometimes I would even add artificial deadlines, which are like made-up deadlines for myself, so I can kind of deceive myself into thinking that it's more urgent. It's just because I'm a procrastinator and it works for me, and it might work for you too. I also put in everything, including my extracurriculars, on my iCalendar so I can visualize my day, my week, and my month ahead. That way, I know exactly how much time I have to myself in between classes and other commitments, which I can use to study, hang out with friends, or just relax. So here's a general framework of my study routine. First, I take notes in class, whether by handwriting, typing, or using my iPad. And then I consolidate my notes by putting together my notes, class handouts, and PowerPoints. And then I study those notes and do practice questions if applicable for courses like chemistry, physics, and math. And I'll go over these more in depth. The first step is taking notes in lecture. Like I said, there are three main methods I used: handwriting, typing, and using my iPad. For handwriting, I printed off the PowerPoint slides before the lecture and I took notes directly on it, but profs don't always post PowerPoint slides early in advance so that I have time to print them off before the lecture. So in that case, I just brought a spring notebook and I put the date and the title at the top and I took notes in class like that. I didn't write the stuff that was already in the PowerPoint slides, but anything else that the prof explained or mentioned because I was gonna have access to the file anyway. I also didn't care about how neat my handwriting was because the point of this was not to make it look pretty and perfect, but to write down as much as possible. Pros of handwriting is that it makes you focus and it engages your brain in a more effective way because you're actively reorganizing and reconceptualizing the information by putting them in your own words or using symbols or visuals to represent the information in the way that is most comprehensible to you. A downside is that handwriting, of course, takes a bit more time to put down the information than typing, so you might miss some things. As for typing, this was the best method for classes in which profs talk really fast or for classes that I didn't want to miss a single detail. I would type as much as possible and process the information more thoroughly later. For typing, I would open the Word document and put the date and the lecture title and type out the lecture content. And I organized these files by date on my computer just to make my life a little easier. Or if I had the PowerPoint file, I would take notes in the notes section right below the slide section. Pros for this is that it's faster and there's less chance that you'll miss something, unless you fall asleep in class, of course. But I would sometimes find myself mindlessly typing what the prof says, not really fully paying attention to the lecture. For using iPad for note-taking, I think this is a nice segue between handwriting and typing. You guys know how much I love using my iPad. I use the app Notability where you can directly import the PowerPoint to the app, and handwrite notes or hand draw diagrams if the prof draws something on the board. Or if they talk too fast, you can switch to typing at any point. With this app, you could even record the lecture and it syncs with either your handwriting or the typing. So when you're reviewing and if in case you miss something in lecture, you can actually go back to the exact place in the recording by clicking the handwritten stroke or the word that you typed. You don't have to search through the whole recording, which saves you a lot of time. I have a whole video on how I use my iPad in school, so I'll put that in the card above. The next step is studying the notes. After class or whenever I had time, I would reorganize my notes in a more orderly fashion because in lecture, you don't always have the time to form full sentences and you don't always make sense and they might just be all over the place. And I must confess that I have fallen asleep more times than I would like to admit, so some writings were not legible. So for handwritten notes before I got my iPad, I would actually print off the PowerPoint slides and I would fit 4 or 6 slides per page. This was my attempt to save some trees. And then I underlined and highlighted the important parts in the slide and transferred the notes I took in class to the margin in a more concise way. Same thing applies to the typed notes where I would print them off, highlight, and write notes in the margin or in between the lines. As I was studying, if I felt like I needed some more information, I would read the textbook or look up some stuff online and filled in the holes in my notes. And for important terms like the ones I had to memorize, I highlighted them in a different color, and after the first round of studying, I would go back and revisit those terms and create flashcards if needed. I use Quizlet, but you can also use Anki or Anki if that's more familiar to you. For terms that can be categorized, such as in microbiology where you have to memorize the names of bacteria, I created tables in which I organized by characteristics, modes of transmission, where they live, and etc. This was super helpful because you're not just memorizing hard facts, but you're actively making connections and strengthening the wiring in your brain, and using the table allows you to think and remember visually. For certain courses, I made a study guide. It was a compilation of my notes, stuff from the textbook, from the internet, from all the different sources I used. I either handwrote them or typed and printed them off and read them 2 or 3 times before the test. So how do you know you actually know and understand something? Imagine that your friend asked you to explain a concept or how to solve a certain problem. You should be able to explain in your own words without looking at your notes. Remember, recognition and recall are 2 different processes. If you skim through your notes over and over, you may be able to recognize a lot of the stuff on your notes because your eyes get used to it, but that might give rise to false confidence. You should be able to recall information without looking, so try saying out loud or writing down what you know on a piece of paper. This journal framework can be modified depending on the subject you're studying for. For subjects that require practice like chemistry, physics, or math, I did a similar thing with note-taking, and additionally, I did all of the questions we did in lecture until I could do them on my own and I felt confident about them. If there were practice tests or mock exams, I did all of them, corrected them, and if I got a question wrong, I wrote memos on why I made certain mistakes, how to avoid them, and what to remember, so that I could read these notes right before the test to avoid making the same mistake. For both my lecture notes and practice tests, I put little stickies wherever I had uncertainties or questions. I tried finding the answers to them on my own, but for the ones I couldn't, I made an appointment with the professor during their office hours and asked them in person. I did this for the majority of my classes in my undergrad. Sometimes it would be a quick 10-minute appointment, and other times it took half an hour to an hour. Initially, I felt kind of bad about taking up their time, but they actually like it if you go in and ask questions because it shows how dedicated you are to the class. Plus, professors remember you and get to know you as a person, so if you ask them for a reference letter later for med school or grad school, for example, they'll have things to say. In my undergrad, some of the courses I really enjoyed were philosophy courses. But at first, as a science student, it was a little difficult to get used to the arts way of learning the information because it's not just memorization, but really understanding and making connections. What really helped me and what made me fall in love with philosophy is this method called visual note-taking. I kind of invented it out of frustration when I had a hard time connecting different philosophers to their ideas and how they relate to one another. And I think this method would be beneficial for you if you're taking a class that involves sort of like an evolution of ideas over time or a network of ideas. And I'll make a separate video on this later. So this is all I have for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you'll be able to apply some of these tips for your own studying. And let me know in the comments what study strategies work best for you. With that said, I hope you guys have a good rest of the week, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye! Do you guys like this background? Does it look like I'm out in the forest with my chair and other... Why do they have to be so loud? This is taking up my battery.